Hey everyone, Chris Carter here on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I'll be joined today by Ray Fittipaldo, and we'll be talking about the Steelers quarterback situation with Russell Wilson getting closer to being ready. But Justin Fields still practicing this week as QB1. What does all that mean, and what might it mean if Russell Wilson does get the chance to take over in the offense? We'll also talk about the mounting injuries on both sides of the ball for the Steelers, and specifically at two positions that could put the Steelers behind the eight ball in their upcoming matchup against the Raiders. And we got to talk about George Pickens and what's going on there and how the Steelers are managing his situation. All here on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Let's get into it.
You are now listening to the North Shore Drive podcast, a show on all things Pittsburgh sports from the writers of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, hosted by Christopher Carter.
Hello and welcome to the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I'm your host, Chris Carter, joined today by Ray Fittipaldo, one of our great Steelers beat writers. And as always, you can find this show on your podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of our Monday, Wednesday, Friday episodes of the North Shore Drive podcast, as well as the daily content that comes out from all of our Pittsburgh sports writers here at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. And as always, this show is brought to you by Edgar Snyder Associates. Whether you're injured in a car accident or hurt on the job, Edgar Snyder Associates has helped injury victims for over 40 years recover more than $2 billion on their behalf. If you or a loved one have been seriously injured in an accident, call 1-800-94-EDGAR or visit www.edgarsnyder.com for a free consultation. And remember, there's never a fee unless they get money for you. All right, Ray, let's get into what we saw with Mike Tomlin. You and Jerry did your recap, but let's focus specifically on what he said about the quarterback situation, because that continues to be a developing situation. Justin Fields will practice this week as QB1, and I think you and I can agree he's most likely going to probably start again this week. But Mike Tomlin also said Russell Wilson's going to get his first chance to be a full participant in practice. To me, that is a sign that his his return is much closer than it has been at any point in other times. And we actually might get to the question soon of what will the Steelers do when both players are actively healthy and able to practice for a full week without question.
Yeah, Chris. I think the conversation we have to have now is if Russell Wilson is the number 2 on Sunday and the Steelers get off to another terrible start, how long of a leash does Justin Fields have in that situation? Feel like I'm beating a dead horse with it, but I'll just give the weekly update. 5 first quarters, 13 points. It's not nearly good enough. I know Justin isn't the only problem. Mike Tomlin detailed yesterday how the offensive line seemingly gets off to slow starts. They improve. Justin improves throughout the game. So, we get it. It's the totality of the team. It's not all Justin, but you can't change your entire offensive line. You're not going to change the skill position players. The one position you can change, where you might get a difference in play, is the quarterback situation. And as we've noted all along since March, Russell Wilson was brought in here to be the starter. The only reason he's not the starter is because he got that calf injury doing the conditioning test in July. So here we are 2 months later. I think we're closer to Russell being the quarterback, but Justin still has a chance to go out and prevent that from happening by getting the Steelers off to a good start and winning that football game in Las Vegas.
Yeah, I think that this is something that the Steelers have been waiting to see, what can Russell Wilson do. And listen, Justin Fields has not been abysmal as a quarterback for the Steelers. In fact, I think he's done better than what he did in Chicago. He's shown the capacity to improve. Those are positive things in his marks. But as I noted in my Steelers film room study that I did for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, by the way, read all of our work at post-gazette.com, where I broke down several plays. While there were other factors that played into why the Steelers weren't able to capitalize on some plays, Justin Fields was one of those factors. And there were times where there were guys open deep downfield. Play was called, play was there, and he didn't even see them. And there were times he threw into double coverage when he had Calvin Austin or George Pickens breaking open in middle parts of the field while they were double covering Van Jefferson. And for a lot of the blame that gets heaped upon coaching and schemes and play calling and offensive coordinators, no offensive coordinator has ever been appreciated in Pittsburgh. these are opportunities that they drew up, and they gave him opportunities to make plays, and it didn't happen. Now, some of them weren't his fault. There were drops from Van Jefferson, Connor Hayward, George Pickens even dropped a pass. George Pickens isn't running his routes hard. We'll get to that later in the show. There's other factors. The offensive line's giving up pressure at inopportune moments. All those are factors, but what you're hoping is, I think, if you're the Steelers, is that either Justin Fields grows to see more of the things a lot faster than he has so that he can get the ball out quicker and get it into the rhythm of these plays and these that are being designed for them. Or if he doesn't, when Russell Wilson does get in, he is making those reads and you're seeing the ball get to Calvin Austin when he's breaking over the middle against a linebacker, or get the ball out a little bit quicker to Connor Hayward when they get matched up with a linebacker who's out of position.
Yeah, I think we have to dispel a false narrative that's coming out of Sunday's game. I hear this a lot from fans when I interact with them on my chats or through email. The Steelers are too conservative. Well, you could have said that the first 4 weeks of the season, Chris, but as you pointed out, they took a lot of shots on first down in this game, and Justin and his tight ends just did not connect on them. Now, you can make an argument that the Steelers shouldn't be targeting tight ends, second and third string tight ends. That's a whole different subject, but there were plays to be had out there, and Justin didn't make the plays. And I thought it was interesting, Chris. Mike Tomlin specifically talked about the ball to Connor Hayward, where he leaked out as the H-back, and Mike made a point to say it could have been a touchdown. Now, so he was schemed open. I think what people don't realize here, Connor dove and he dropped it when he went to the ground. But that ball has to be put in a place where Connor Hayward can run in stride, and then maybe he does get a touchdown. So, just that ball being, a yard too long really threw off that play. So I think these are the little details in offensive football that sometimes people fail to grasp. And I think Mike Tomlin subtly got that point across yesterday.
I definitely think he did. And listen, it's not just Justin's fault there too, because guess what? If Broderick Jones holds his block for maybe another half a second, Justin Fields gets to set his feet and maybe he does make a better throw there. But to your point, you still have to make those decisions. And there's other shot plays that even I broke down in my film study. Like there was a play where Calvin Austin runs a deep crossing route against a cover 2 defense. George Pickens kind of backs off the safety, and you get Calvin Austin against a linebacker. Meanwhile, a safety in a corner run with Van Jefferson. If you ever get a defense to double team Van Jefferson, you did your job, because that means someone else, one of those other playmakers is wide open. But Justin Fields doesn't see that. He goes to the double team where Van Jefferson is, and it's like moments like that where it's like those can be game-changing plays, because you hit on either of those plays, a touchdown to Connor Hayward or a big play here. We know Calvin Austin against the linebacker in a plenty of space. That could also be a touchdown. We saw that against the Chargers. Either of those plays hit, Steelers might win the game. And that's how small the margin of victory and defeat is right now with the Steelers. That the simplest of seeing something just a little bit faster or seeing something at all could be the factor between the Steelers winning some of these games and losing some of these games. And again, it is not to say that that Justin Fields is completely at fault for everything here, because I know some people, they really want to defend Justin Fields, and I get it. There's exciting parts to his game, and he is growing. He's a young player. That's all understandable, and I think that he's handled his situation very well for what he's been doing. But there's a reason why Russell Wilson is a 9-time Pro Bowler, a 13th year player in the NFL, and why the team was so excited to get him, and why they got him first before they got Justin Fields, because he's a guy that's expected to make more of those plays.
Yeah, I thought Mike Tomlin broke it down pretty good. Sometimes, 24 hours, 48 hours after a loss, you can kind of just put things simply. He broke it down in 2 ways. Third downs both ways. Steelers couldn't stop the Cowboys. Steelers couldn't convert on first downs. And then the splash plays. You look at what the Cowboys did, 48-yarder to Jaylen Tolbert, 27-yarder to Jake Ferguson. They had some other big plays. I think 2 other plays, 25 yards or more, and the Steelers didn't have any. And if, to our larger point here, if you hit some of those first down shots, then you're producing those big plays. Even if you don't convert into touchdowns, you're kicking field goals, and you're not going 3 and out, or, what they did in the first half. So, that's really what the story of the game was. The Cowboys were able to pop some big plays, and the Steelers, in the end, couldn't get off the field against that Cowboys offense.
Agreed. Let's talk about this team's injuries next, because they are mounting, and while they're no excuse for the Steelers right now, they're the thing that they're going to have to play around in this game against the Raiders, because there's already several players listed as out and others listed as doubtful. We'll get into those next here on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter, Ray Fittipaldo. But first, I want to remind you this show is brought to you by Edgar Snyder Associates. If you're injured in an accident, you're probably wondering what's next. Well, for over 40 years, Edgar Snyder Associates have helped injury victims answer that very question. Whether it's gathering evidence, collecting medical records, or dealing with the insurance companies, Edgar Snyder Associates have helped over 75,000 people handle the what's next question. Call 1-800-94-EDGAR or visit www.edgarsnyder.com for a free consultation. And remember, there's never a fee unless they get money for you. We're also brought to you by our friends at SmartSide. Here's a message from SmartSide.
Between beauty and durability, making your neighbors jealous has never been easier. Introducing LP SmartSide Expert Finish Trim and Siding, now in brushed smooth texture. Available in 16 versatile colors, LP SmartSide Expert Finish products help create timeless designs and beautiful, longer-lasting dream homes. That's the beauty of brushed smooth.
Back here on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, Chris Carter, Ray Fittipaldo. Ray, let's talk about these injuries and what the Steelers are going to have to do to get around them. Let's lead off with the outside linebackers, because that was the one that was prevalent at the end of this last game. The Steelers, Mike Tomlin coming out Tuesday saying no Alex Highsmith, saying no Nick Herbig, which means Jeremiah Moon's probably going to be your starting outside linebacker across from TJ Watt. And then you're going to have guys, also DeMarvin Leal, out for this game. So, 3 of your guys that you were expecting to help on the edge, not available. So now you're going to have to go to Isaiah Loudermilk, who played out there a little bit. And there were 2 names that were thrown in there that I didn't recognize off the top of my head, because I have not memorized all the practice squad guys that they're picking up. Yeah. What do the Steelers have to do to manage this situation and keep TJ Watt fresh? Because that was the whole point of having Nick Herbig ready to go and moving DeMarvin Leal outside, was so that they can rotate TJ Watt, and then he's fresh in the fourth quarter and not gas because he's played 70 snaps.
Yeah, the way you look at it, Chris, I thought outside linebacker was really going to be a good position of depth for them this year. And all along, I kind of thought Marcus Golden would come back and he'd be that number 4 that you need. And then he's back for 2 days, and then he abruptly retires. And now they're kind of hurting at that position. They were trying to get by with DeMarvin Leal. Now they're going to try to get by with Isaiah Loudermilk. You're going to call up practice squad guys to probably play, significant snaps. You're not going to play TJ Watt 100% of the snaps. You're certainly not going to play Jeremiah Moon, a starter's number of snaps. So, we'll see how they divvy it up this week. But, position of strength at the beginning of the season, 6 weeks in here due to these injuries, it's not looking so strong anymore.
Yeah, and now you need to figure out a way to mitigate that. Now, the Steelers have certainly gone into games in the past dealing with injuries, and like every team deals with injuries at some point, right? But it's the rush at one position that can really force you to have to buckle down in certain spots here. What's a way that you think that they can try to alleviate this problem on defense, if there's another position that can help out, or a way to scheme up to say, like, hey, you know what? Don't expect this group to be the group that dominates this week, even though TJ Watt's still available.
Yeah, maybe you have to blitz more. Mike Tomlin and Terrell Austin have been resistant to that, but when you don't have a guy like Nick Herbig coming off the edge there, you're going to have to create pressure somehow. I thought it was interesting. I think somebody brought up, well, can Peyton Wilson do that? Mike Tomlin pretty much came out and said, no, he can't line up on the edge. But, Peyton Wilson, Patrick Queen, Landon Roberts, I think all 3 of those guys are good blitzers. So if you want to bring some pressure from the middle, maybe that's one way, that you could help out your edge rushers in a week. They're probably not going to be as effective. But, Chris, what's going to happen. TJ is going to get double and triple team. Cam Hayward is probably going to see a lot of double teams. So guys like Larry Ogunjobi, Keanu Benton, Jeremiah Moon, guys you don't really think of as pass rushers, they got to contribute this week. And if they don't, Mike Tomlin and Terrell Austin have to recognize that, and they got to be able to bring some blitzes to help out that pass rush.
I agree. They got to bring some heat. They got to find different ways to get home. And it also require other guys to step up, the interior guys, because guess what? If Alex Highsmith nor Nick Herbig are there, teams are going to say, all right, we don't got to worry about that side. We're going to double, triple team. They already double and triple team TJ Watt. So imagine what they're going to be able to do now. Yeah. That's going to leave the door open for, hey, Cam Hayward, Keanu Benton, Larry Ogunjobi, somebody. You got to win on the inside and help out. And like you said, also send some blitzes. But that's not the only position they're run down at, because running back is also a rough spot. Najee Harris at one point was hurt during the game, and I was like, man, they're going to be down all three of their running backs that they thought would be available for all of this season. But we already know Cordarrelle Patterson out for this game. Jaylen Warren doubtful, as Mike Tomlin said. So it looks like it's going to be Najee Harris again for this game, and then joined by Aaron Champlin and Jonathan Ward. Ray, this team was supposed to run through its running backs. Even if the offensive line wasn't dominant, the hope was that, hey, you could wear teams down with Najee Harris and then Jaylen Warren and then Cordarrelle Patterson. But now all that's gone. And again, these are two strengths that were supposed to be on either side of the ball that are depleted now from injuries. What do the Steelers do about this? Is this mean like, hey, you know what? Maybe it does mean they're just going to have to pass the ball more.
Yeah, man, Chris, I thought it was interesting that they didn't ride Najee Harris in that game. I mean, you saw Jonathan Ward early and often in that game. You saw Aaron Champlin in there on a critical play where they're driving. He's in there on a 3rd and 8, and they pitch it to him, and I don't know, he gets like 5 yards, but it really wasn't close to being a first down. So, we're going to talk about George Pickens in the next segment. I think it's different conversations, but they are still managing Najee Harris's snap counts and his touches. And I don't know if it's because they want to preserve him for a 17-game season, or if they really, truly feel like Aaron Champlin is a better 3rd down back than he is. So I don't know. I mean, it's a discussion that's got to be had this week, but I for one, was a little bit surprised that Najee Harris didn't get more of a workload when those guys like Cordarrelle Patterson and Jaylen Warren were not available against the Cowboys.
I mean, and maybe, who knows? Maybe the Steelers are protecting him because they're like, look, we can't lose that guy. We've lost everybody else, and it might be a factor of let's keep him as healthy as possible. But there was also a point in that game where he was in the blue tent and he was getting looked at. And I think at the end of the first half, he was on the sideline with a helmet, kind of waiting to get back in there. And he did get back in there in the second half. But, I think it's a kind of a solid acknowledgement from the Steelers that, hey, you gotta keep him healthy, because if you lose him, then you're losing everything else. And then you're going out there, you're looking like you were in the 2015 playoffs with Fitzgerald, Toussaint, and who was the other guy? I forget his
name.
Right now. Exactly. Yeah, there you go. I couldn't remember that the second one's name, but they were the 4th and 5th string running backs that year, and that's who they had to work with. You don't want to be in that situation, especially when this offense is designed to kind of run through the running backs here. But Ray, this is nothing new, to the Steelers. Back, I remember, I think it was 2022 when they faced off against Tom Brady and the Buccaneers. They came to town, and none of their corners and none of their safeties were available, but the Steelers found a way to mitigate it against one of the best quarterbacks of all time. What are the Steelers' capabilities to counter these situations on either side of the ball with the personnel they have?
I think Jonathan Ward's a good option. I know the offensive line struggled early in that game. Ward didn't get the touches in the second half. I think it was more Najee at that point. But listen, if they could start a little bit faster, I do think Ward can be effective. And then I also think, Chris, maybe it's time, and maybe this was part of the calculus with Patterson and Warren out. Maybe it is time for the passing game to step up and to take advantage of some of these situations. I mean, we just talked about it. You're throwing on first down. Make some plays this week. If you could loosen them up, hit some plays in the passing game, then that's only going to open up the running lane. So they got to be a more balanced offense. It's not a secret. I think that's part of the reason why the running game and the passing game is struggling. Both those two both aspects of that offense just aren't clicking on all cylinders right now, and that's been a big problem.
Yeah, I agree. It's been a big problem, and the Steelers need to overcome it. One way that they could overcome it in the passing game is if George Pickens could run his routes a lot harder than he did Sunday night. I want to talk about George Pickens and the quote unquote load management the Steelers are using on him, and what do you think? What your thoughts are on how they've managed that situation? We'll get to that next here on the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter, Ray Fittipaldo. But first, I want to remind you the show is brought to you by Savinas, Kane, and Gallucci. They are Mesothelioma and his bestest lawyers with over 85 years of experience. Call them today for a free consultation. That's Savinas, Kane, and Gallucci. We're also brought to you by Moon Township Honda. You can get your new Moon Honda at Moon Township Honda at 5802 University Boulevard, Moon Township or at moonhonda.com on their website. Here's a message from our friends at Moon Township Honda.
To build the Honda CR-V Hybrid, we took everything you love about the CR-V and kicked it up a notch with greater power for a CR-V unlike any before. Adventure confidently with Honda, Car and Driver's most awarded brand in 10 Best history. The CR-V and CR-V Hybrid, part of the Honda line of rugged vehicles. Visit your local Honda dealer where new vehicles are arriving daily. Buy online or reserve from select Honda dealers.
We're back here in the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Chris Carter, Ray Fittipaldo. Ray, Mike Tomlin is acknowledging that, the Steelers are limiting George Pickens' snaps, but they said it's no different than what they do for Cam Hayward to keep him fresh in the game, except it is. And I went back and I charted all of the plays, and that was the least amount of times George Pickens has been involved in the offense all season long. The lowest percentage of time he was involved in 58% of the offensive snaps Sunday night. The lowest before that, I think, was 68%, and he was kind of at the consistent rate before that game at around 73 to 75% throughout the season. And look, get your guys rest when you can. Not everyone can run every time and do all that. But it's clear the Steelers are limiting George Pickens for more than just because he's tired, because it's not like they're throwing him the ball a whole lot. It's not like he's having an extreme workload that's making it difficult than others, especially when guys like Calvin Austin and Van Jefferson outsnapped him in this last game. I think you and I can cut through the nonsense and assess that, like, hey, a lot of this is about George Pickens' attitude and how things have gone here. But Ray, I thought it was very telling at the end of the press conference when I asked Mike Tomlin, I was like, hey, is part of this because he's not running his routes hard? Because as you and I have talked about off camera, there were plays where, they were even designed. It's different when you don't run your route too hard and it's like a quick pass to the other side of the field and you don't sell it. That's one thing. But when the play is designed for you and you run your route in a very lazy kind of way and obvious, like you're not going full speed, and it was a play action pass and you're running a crossing pattern, the linebackers are sucked up to the line of scrimmage, you're running your crossing pattern, you're in a wide open position. If you run full speed, you got a whole sideline to yourself. But because he jogs, Trayvon Diggs is like, oh, that's what's going on, I'm going to jump on that route. And then Justin Fields has to throw the ball away. It's taking away a big splash play potential there. And who knows how many times he's done that now. If you go back and you were to chart every time he hasn't run 100% here, do you think there's a way to get through to George Pickens? Because this was something they had to deal with last year. Or is this just going to be an in perpetuity thing that just continues on and on and on? Because at some point, he's a grown man. He has to answer for himself for what he is and isn't doing on the field.
Mike Tomlin is taking a little bit of a different approach this year. He is cutting his playing time. Maybe go back to last year when George Pickens wasn't blocking for Jaylen Warren in Indianapolis. Chris, nothing really changed. We don't know if he was fined behind the scenes or whatever for his lack of hustle in that game, but he was a big part of what they did in that 3-game winning streak to get into the playoffs. So they found a way to keep him involved and to get him back on track. Maybe this time they're saying, George, we're not going to do that this time. You got to grow up. You got to take accountability. And I don't know if Arthur Smith or Zach Azzani, maybe they're having a say-so in this. But I do think we have to acknowledge that what Mike Tomlin did last year, he's not doing this year. And now we have to sit back and see how George responds to that.
I think that's the thing, is that, it's going to be about how does he respond? Because I even looked at it, like the game before, he did a normal amount of snaps, against the Colts. And then you see this snap count here. I wonder if it was like a message sent. Will the message be received in this instance? George Pickens also. I thought it was interesting, Ray. And I didn't get to talk. I don't think I got to talk to you about this. Did you get to see George Pickens make a little podcast appearance on Adam Schefter yesterday? On his ESPN podcast, just like a tail end of it. All of a sudden, just George Pickens is on Adam Schefter's show. Did you get to see that and what their talks were about?
I did not. Fill me in. What did he say?
So you'd think that when George Pickens didn't talk after the game, didn't talk the day after the game, and in fact, as noted by the Pittsburgh media, was in the Steelers equipment room and did not come out, and so he still hasn't spoken to Pittsburgh media. That there's some obvious questions. You're not running your routes hard. You're slamming your helmet on the sideline. You're dropping passes. Your snaps are getting limited. There's some obvious stuff that's going on. So Adam Schefter of ESPN would definitely ask questions about that, right, Ray? Well, he didn't. His questions were about, Mike Tomlin, which, that's fair game. How's Mike Tomlin? And George Pickens sort of gave he's great and, cited several of his Mike Tomlinisms. But then every question after that was, it's about George. Have you always played wide receiver? Oh, you played running back in literally, that's impressive. So you like wide receiver. Who's your favorite receiver of all time? Softballs like that. And look, I get it. Adam Schefter, he's doing his thing. Yes, but I'm not here to bang on Adam Schefter. But obviously, that's an agent calling up, hey, if you want me to be a source, hook my guy up, give him a softball interview, and then we could generate some positive press about him at that time. That's definitely what's going on over there. Let's not hide what that was. But to me, this isn't going to be fixed by some national interview from George Pickens. This is going to be fixed by George Pickens owning up to what he is and isn't doing and improving upon it. And that starts with improving upon it in practice, and then so that the Steelers can count on him to improve upon it in the game.
Well, George Pickens is scheduled to speak with the media today on Wednesday. That's his day to speak. Listen, he could speak on Thursday or Friday, but the point is, Chris, he refused an interview request from me after the game, and I think a few others after the game. As you mentioned, he did not make himself available on Monday. I mean, if the Steelers are smart, they tell him to do the interview today and to get all this stuff out of the way. You don't want any more distractions than you need going into this game against the Raiders. Why would you want this to stretch into Thursday or even Friday? So, we'll see what George says today. I mean, last week his interview was a joke. He had a bunch of one word and one sentence answers, but I think the questions will be more pointed this week than they were last week when a lot of this stuff wasn't happening yet.
Yeah, I think that's the thing here. And Ray, listen, the Steelers aren't unique in this situation. There's diva receivers all over. There's diva players all over the league. The Jets just fired Robert Saleh. Well, he's 2-3 because Aaron Rodgers is there. That's an obvious situation. Even the Chiefs have dealt with their diva wide receiver. You look at what Kadarius Toney has cost them games under Andy Reid. And there's players across the league. With Devontae Adams is demanding a trade right now, and the cloud that hangs over the Raiders organization. You can go down the line, and there's things everywhere. But it's still about, how do the Steelers manage this right now? And especially because George Pickens was supposed to be his contract year. It's his third year. He's the only primary super threat the passing game has. Pat Freiermuth is there as well, but George Pickens was supposed to be the guy that he would be like, hey, this can be your year to show everyone I am a top 5 wide receiver. And then you're dealing with this stuff. And who knows? Maybe after this week, he'll shape up and it'll be there. But certainly, I think it's a challenge of this team and this coaching staff and this team to see how they handle it. Because I didn't get to watch the sidelines too closely Sunday night. I was looking on the field. I was using my binoculars, breaking down plays. But I talked to other people who were watching the sidelines, and you saw times where George Pickens would sit down at a bench next to Miles Killebrew. Killer would get up and walk away. As Justin Fields at times didn't want anything to do with Pickens on the sidelines. And to me, that's a message being sent from the team that's hey, your effort and your attitude is not enough around here right now, and things need to change. And so it's not going to be about does Mike Tomlin say the right words to get him motivated, because they're doing it right now. They're saying, hey, you know what, you don't want to give an effort, you're not going to be out on the field as much as everybody else. But it's going to be about, does this guy own up to what he needs to own up to be a better player and be the player that he wants to be if he wants to make a long-term deal in the NFL as a top paying wide receiver. Yeah,
I mean, listen, Chris, this stuff kind of boiled over and it became a topic after the game with the media, but if you were paying close attention in the locker room after the game, Pat Freiermuth gave an interview, and he talked specifically about giving effort, walking your butt off. The targets will come your way. He was talking about himself, but you could just read between the lines, and I think that was directed towards
that's
George
pointing
Pickens.
right to one dude.
Yep. So I mean, it's we know it's an issue in the locker room as well. His stuff last year in Indianapolis was a big issue in that locker room. That kind of got smoothed over, with the winning streak at the end and, some positive vibes going into the offseason. But here we are again, Chris, second week of October, and we got some drama at receiver.
Certainly, and we'll get to see how this plays out. It's Wednesday morning as we're recording this. Ray's going to be heading into the facility today, and we'll see what George Pickens says, if he says anything. If it's back to just being quiet, a lot more quiet than he is with Adam Schefter. Granted, we'll see how that plays out here. But the Steelers, they got a week ahead of themselves. They got to play Sunday at Las Vegas. They need to bounce out of a 2-game losing streak, get back into the win column there. We'll keep breaking that down all week long at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, post-gazette.com for all our written work. Thank you, Ray, for joining us here on the North Shore Drive podcast. A reminder, you can get this show every Monday, Wednesday, Friday on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoyed. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of our daily content that comes out from our Pittsburgh sports writers here at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Back Friday with more on the North Shore Drive podcast. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all the sports coverage from the Post-Gazette that we have to offer, visit post-gazette.com.